I am Samantha, 28 years old, and the scars on my face tell a story of betrayal from within my own family. My sister Amber was always jealous of me, but I never thought her vindictive nature would lead to such brutality. That day in high school when her boyfriend shattered my face against the lockers was meant to break me completely. They thought I would stay silent retreat into the shadows. Instead, I found a strength I never knew I had. Before I share my story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe if you want to hear how I turned my trauma into triumph. Growing up, Amber and I were just 3 years apart. I was the older sister, always trying to set a good example. Our parents, Catherine and Michael, meant well, but they had a habit of comparing us that planted seeds of competition early on. My mother would say things like, "Amber has such pretty hair like a little princess." "Samantha, you should try those new conditioners I bought." My father would counter with, "But Samantha got straight, as again. Amber, why can't you focus more on your studies like your sister?" Those comparisons created an unspoken division between us. I was labeled the smart one while Amber was considered the pretty one. The truth was more nuanced. I was not unattractive, just less conventionally beautiful than my sister. I had a rounder face, wore glasses from an early age, and preferred comfortable clothes to fashionable ones. Amber, on the other hand, had naturally wavy blonde hair, bright blue eyes, and the kind of effortless beauty that turned heads even when she was just 12. Academically, I thrived. Learning came naturally to me, and I genuinely enjoyed reading and solving problems. Amber struggled with most subjects requiring tutors and extra help. This difference only intensified the comparison game our parents played. Despite these differences, our early relationship had more good moments than bad. We shared a bedroom until I was 13, whispering secrets after bedtime and creating elaborate fantasy worlds with our dolls. I helped her with homework, and she helped me pick out clothes for special occasions. We were different but complementary. That dynamic shifted dramatically when we moved to a new town at the start of my junior year in high school. I was 16 and Amber was 13, just starting as a freshman. The move was due to my father's promotion, taking us from our small hometown in Nebraska to a suburban community outside Denver. New environments reveal character, and ours emerged in starkly different ways. I approached the change methodically, researching the school before we arrived, joining clubs that aligned with my interests, and making an effort to meet people. Within a month, I had found my place among the debate team, art club, and a small group of friends who shared my interests in books and indie music. Jessica became my closest friend almost immediately. We bonded over our shared love of photography and classic novels. Taylor, another early friend, introduced me to her study group, expanding my social circle further. I was never the most popular girl, but I was content with my place in the school hierarchy. Amber, however, struggled in ways I had never seen before. In our previous school, her beauty had automatically granted her social status. Here, in a larger, more affluent school, pretty girls were abundant. For the first time, Amber had to compete for attention, and she lacked the social skills to navigate this new terrain. She tried joining the cheerleading squad but didn't make the cut. She attempted to befriend the popular girls, but they found her too eager, too obvious in her desire to be accepted. I noticed her growing frustration at home. She spent hours in front of the mirror experimenting with makeup and different hairstyles. She begged our parents for designer clothes they could barely afford. When these external changes didn't yield the results she wanted, her resentment began to focus on me. The first incidents were small, easily dismissed. My history homework disappeared the night before it was due. Rumors circulated that I had cheated on a math test. My favorite sweater went missing, only to turn up in the garbage with a mysterious stain. When I confronted Amber, she would feign innocence with such conviction that I sometimes doubted my own suspicions. Our parents remained oblivious to the growing problem. "Sisters fight," my mother would say with a shrug when I tried to explain the pattern I was seeing. "You are the older one, Samantha. Try to be understanding. Amber is having a hard time adjusting." So I tried. I invited Amber to join me and my friends for movie nights. I offered to help her study for tests. I complimented her new hairstyle and the outfit she had saved up to buy. I believed that if I extended enough olive branches, she would eventually recognize that we were on the same side. Looking back, I see how naive that approach was. I was treating the situation like a temporary adjustment issue when it was actually the beginning of a dangerous obsession. Amber didn't want my help or my friendship. She wanted what she perceived as my ease in fitting, in my academic success, my genuine friendships, and increasingly she wanted me to fail. The dynamic between Amber and me shifted dramatically halfway through that first year at our new school. Brandon Lewis entered the picture, and with him came a new level of complexity in Amber's resentment toward me. Brandon was a junior like me, the star of the basketball team, with the kind of charisma that made both teachers and students gravitate toward him. Tall, with dark hair and an easy smile, he carried himself with the confidence of someone who had never questioned his place in the world. I had a few classes with him and found him arrogant, the type who relied on charm rather than effort to get what he wanted. Amber met him at a school pep rally and was immediately entranced. When he asked for her number, she talked about nothing else for days. Brandon says I am the prettiest freshman he has ever seen, she told me, her eyes shining with pride. He says I could be a model. Within weeks, they were officially dating, and Amber's entire identity became wrapped up in being Brandon's girlfriend. Through him, she gained entry into the popular crowd she had been desperately trying to join. Suddenly, she was sitting at the coveted lunch tables, invited to the right parties, included in group photos that would rack up hundreds of likes on social media. Her newfound social status should have eased her insecurities, but instead it seemed to sharpen her focus on my continued success in other areas. That spring, I was nominated for both junior class president and editor of the school literary magazine. My photography was selected for display in the main hallway. My English teacher suggested I apply for a prestigious summer writing program. Each achievement became a perceived slight against Amber. "Do you have to be such an overachiever?" she snapped one evening as I worked on my campaign posters at the kitchen table. "Nobody likes a teacher's pet." The first public humiliation attempt came during lunch period. I was sitting with Jessica and Emma discussing ideas for the literary magazine when Amber walked by with her new friends. She seemed to trip, sending her open soda spilling directly onto my white blouse and notebook. "Oh my gosh, I am so clumsy," she exclaimed, her voice pitched to carry across the cafeteria. Her friends giggled behind their hands as I sat dripping with sticky cola. Emma immediately handed me her sweater to cover the stain. "That was no accident," she whispered as we headed to the bathroom. "I saw her adjust her trajectory when she got close to your table." That night I confronted Amber in our shared bathroom. "What was that about today?" I asked as she applied her nightly face mask. "What are you talking about?" she replied, eyes wide with feigned innocence. "The soda incident. You deliberately spilled it on me." She rolled her eyes. "God, you are so paranoid. It was an accident. Not everything is about you, Samantha." When I brought it up with our parents, they sighed in unison. "Girls, this rivalry has to stop," my father said. "You are sisters, not enemies." "It is normal sibling stuff," my mother added. "You two will grow out of it." Their dismissal hurt almost as much as Amber's actions. They refused to see the pattern, to acknowledge that this went beyond normal sibling rivalry. Still, I made one more attempt to bridge the growing divide. I noticed Amber struggling with her geometry homework one evening, frustration evident in her furrowed brow and aggressive pencil strokes. "I could help you with that," I offered cautiously. "I got an A in geometry last year." To my surprise, she agreed. "That would be great, actually. Can we meet in the library after school tomorrow? I have a test on Friday." For the first time in months, I felt hopeful about our relationship. Perhaps this could be a turning point, a way to re-establish the connection we once had. I waited in the library for over an hour the next day, texting her several times with no response. Eventually, Jessica found me there. "Amber is at the mall with Brandon and those girls from the cheerleading squad," she told me gently. "I saw them leaving the parking lot when practice ended." The deliberate stand-up stung, but what I discovered that weekend hurt far more. I was looking for my journal, a leather-bound notebook, where I recorded my thoughts, fears, and hopes. I had last remembered having it on my desk, but it wasn't there. After searching my room thoroughly, a terrible suspicion led me to check Amber's room while she was out with Brandon. I found my journal hidden under her mattress, several pages, dog-eared passages highlighted. She had been reading my most private thoughts, including my insecurities about my appearance, my crush on a boy in my physics class, and my worries about college applications. The violation of privacy felt like a physical blow. When I confronted her after she returned home, her initial denial crumbled under the weight of evidence. "So what if I read it?" she finally spat. "You think you are so perfect, but your journal shows what a mess you really are. Worried about your weight, stressed about college, pining after David who barely knows you exist. It is pathetic." "The only thing pathetic is needing to invade someone's privacy to feel better about yourself," I replied, my voice shaking with anger. "Stay out of my room and stay out of my life." That argument marked the end of any pretense of a normal sibling relationship. I installed a lock on my bedroom door the next day. I kept my important belongings secure. I remained civil when necessary, especially around our parents, but I maintained a careful emotional distance. I had no idea then that this was merely the opening act of a much darker drama to come. As junior year progressed, I found solace in unexpected places. Miss Eleanor Roberts, the art teacher, became a mentor after seeing potential in my photography. She was in her early 40s with short silver hair and an eclectic style that matched her free-spirited approach to teaching. "You have a unique perspective, Samantha," she told me after class one day, pointing to a series of black and white photos I had taken of abandoned buildings on the edge of town. "You find beauty in broken things. That is a rare gift." Under her guidance, my work improved significantly. When she suggested I apply for the Marion Foster Art Scholarship, a prestigious award that would cover half of college tuition, I was both excited and intimidated. "The portfolio submission is due in May," she explained. "You will need to create a cohesive collection around a central theme. I think you could be a strong contender." I threw myself into the project, spending extra hours in the art room after school researching techniques and shooting on weekends. The possibility of winning the scholarship became a beacon, something positive to focus on amid the growing tension at home. Unfortunately, Amber learned about the scholarship opportunity during a family dinner when my father asked about my latest art project. "Miss Roberts thinks I have a real shot at the Marion Foster Scholarship," I explained, unable to hide my enthusiasm. "It would make a huge difference for college tuition." While my parents expressed appropriate excitement, Amber's expression darkened. "Another thing for perfect Samantha to win," she muttered, stabbing at her potatoes. The next day at school, I noticed Brandon watching me in the hallway between classes, his gaze calculating in a way that made me uncomfortable. When I passed him and his basketball teammates, he made a point of speaking louder. "Some girls think they are so special because they can take a few pictures," he said, smirking when I glanced his way. As if anybody really cares about that artsy crap. The harassment continued over the following weeks. Brandon would make comments just loud enough for me to hear whenever we crossed paths. Sometimes about my appearance. "Nice sweater, Sam. My grandma has one just like it." Sometimes about my interests, reading again, "No wonder you cannot get a date." When I mentioned his behavior to Jessica, she frowned. "Amber has been telling people you have a crush on Brandon," she revealed reluctantly. "She is saying you are always asking about him and trying to get his attention." The accusation was so absurd I almost laughed. I barely speak to him, and when I do it is because he is making rude comments. "I know that," Jessica assured me. "But Amber is convincing. She showed people texts from you, supposedly asking about him." "What texts? I never sent any texts about Brandon." "Exactly. People are starting to wonder if she faked them." This explained why I had been excluded from several social events, including Alyssa's birthday party, which had included most of our usual friend group. It also explained the occasional cold shoulder from girls who had previously been friendly. The situation escalated dramatically the following week. I was giving a presentation in our American history class about the civil rights movement using a PowerPoint I had worked on for days. As I clicked to the third slide, the classroom erupted in laughter. Instead of the historical photograph I had selected, the screen showed an embarrassing picture of me from 7th grade during my unfortunate braces and acne phase, photoshopped to exaggerate my features grotesquely. Before I could react, the slides automatically advanced, revealing more mortifying images: me sleeping with my mouth open on a bus trip, me tripping during a track, meet me with food in my teeth. Each photo had been edited to make me look as unattractive as possible. Mr. Harrington, our history teacher, quickly turned off the projector. "That is enough," he said firmly, his face flushed with anger. "Whoever is responsible for this will face serious consequences. Samantha, please see me after class." I stood frozen at the front of the room, my face burning with humiliation as whispers and suppressed giggles continued around me. Somehow I managed to make it back to my seat, staring straight ahead, fighting the tears threatening to spill. After class, Mr. Harrington was kind but helpless. "The PowerPoint was replaced shortly before your presentation," he explained. "The tech department might be able to trace who accessed the computer, but these investigations rarely yield conclusive results." But I didn't need an investigation. As I left the classroom, I found Amber waiting in the hallway, surrounded by her friends, including Brandon. The satisfied smirk on her face confirmed what I already knew. "Why?" I asked her, directly interrupting their laughter. "What did I ever do to deserve this?" Her smile hardened into something ugly. "You think you are so special with your perfect grades and your scholarship opportunity, and everyone thinking you are so deep and talented," she spat. "But those pictures show the truth. You will never be more than a background blur, Samantha. The sooner you accept that, the better." Brandon laughed loudly, slipping his arm around Amber's waist. "Listen to your sister, Sam. Know your place." I walked away, their laughter following me down the hallway. For the first time, I understood that Amber didn't just want to outshine me. She wanted to erase me. The realization was both terrifying and clarifying. That evening, Jessica, Emma, and Lauren came to my house bringing ice cream and movies. "What happened today was cruel and calculated," Lauren said as we sat on my bedroom floor. "But we are not going to let them win." Their support helped me regain my equilibrium. I decided that dropping out of the scholarship competition would be giving Amber exactly what she wanted. Instead, I would pour even more of myself into my portfolio, channeling the pain into my art. What I didn't realize was how dangerous Amber's rage would become when she saw that her public humiliation had failed to break me. April arrived with the pressure of impending deadlines. My scholarship portfolio was due in just 1 week, and I was determined to make it perfect. After several revisions based on Miss Roberts' feedback, I needed to reshoot 2 final photographs to complete my collection titled Invisible Boundaries. The concept explored physical and emotional barriers through a series of images showing people separated by various structures, fences, windows, doorways, shadows. The irony that my own sister had become the most impenetrable boundary in my life was not lost on me. I stayed late after school on a Thursday, using the art room to develop my last photos in the dark room. Miss Roberts had given me permission to use the facilities independently, trusting my care with the equipment. "Just remember to lock up when you leave," she reminded me before heading out around 5 o'clock, "and text your parents if you will be later than 7. I sent a quick message to my mother, letting her know I would be home around 7:30. Then immersed myself in the careful process of developing my final images. The darkroom had always been a sanctuary, its red glow and chemical smell oddly comforting, the gradual emergence of images on blank paper, never failing to feel like magic. I lost track of time, only realizing how late it had gotten when I glanced at my phone and saw it was nearly 7. The school would be mostly empty by now, with only the custodial staff remaining. I carefully packed my portfolio materials and camera, turned off the darkroom equipment, and locked the art room behind me. The hallways were dimly lit and eerily quiet as I made my way toward the nearest exit. I was walking past the gym when I heard a familiar voice. "Working late again, Samantha?" Brandon stepped out from the shadow of the locker room entrance, his tall frame blocking the hallway. He wore his basketball practice clothes, but his hair was dry, suggesting he hadn't actually been practicing. "Excuse me," I said, trying to move past him. "I need to get home." He shifted to block my path. "We need to have a conversation first. About you and your attitude." "I don't have anything to say to you," I replied, clutching my portfolio case tighter. "Please move." His expression hardened. "Amber says you are still acting like you are better than everyone, still going after that scholarship, still not learning your lesson about staying in your place." A chill ran through me as I realized this wasn't a random encounter. Did Amber tell you I would be here tonight? His slight smile was confirmation enough. Let us just say she thought it was time someone explained things to you more clearly. I turned to walk in the opposite direction, thinking I could exit through the south doors instead. But Brandon grabbed my arm, his fingers digging painfully into my bicep. We are not done talking, he growled, pulling me toward the locker room entrance. Let go of me, I demanded, trying to twist free. Now. Or what, he laughed. No one is here to help you, Samantha. I managed to wrench my arm free and started running down the hallway, but Brandon was faster. He caught me in a few strides, grabbing the strap of my portfolio case, yanking me backward with enough force that I lost my balance. My precious photographs scattered across the floor as I stumbled. Look what you made me do, he said, his voice dangerously quiet. Always causing problems. I scrambled to collect my photos, desperate to protect my work, when Brandon grabbed my hair, pulling me to my feet. Leave the stupid pictures, he ordered. We are going to finish our conversation. He dragged me toward the locker room, ignoring my struggles and protests. Once inside, he shoved me against the metal lockers, the impact knocking the wind from my lungs. Amber is tired of you showing her up, he said, his face inches from mine. And I am tired of hearing about it. So, here is what is going to happen. You are going to withdraw from that scholarship thing, and you are going to stop trying so hard at everything. Understand? No, I managed to say, finding a courage I didn't know I had. I will not let you or Amber bully me into giving up opportunities I have earned. His expression changed, then something darkening in his eyes. Wrong answer. What happened next remains fragmented in my memory, flashes of horror, rather than a continuous sequence. Brandon grabbed my shoulders and slammed me into the lockers repeatedly. When I raised my hands to protect my head, he grabbed my hair again, smashing my face directly into the sharp edge of an open locker door. I heard a sickening crack and felt an explosion of pain through my cheekbone and eye socket. Warm blood poured down my face as I collapsed to the floor, my vision blurred and distorted. Brandon wasn't finished. He kicked me in the ribs, knocking me fully to the ground, then grabbed my hair again, lifting my face only to slam it once more against the locker edge. Stop, I pleaded, barely able to form the word through my rapidly swelling lips. Please stop. Next time listen when people tell you your place, he said, standing over me, breathing heavily. I don't know how much longer the attack would have continued if Mr. Williams, the night janitor, hadn't heard the commotion. His voice called from the hallway. Hello, is someone in there? Brandon froze, then whispered, Tell anyone it was me, and next time will be worse. He slipped out the back exit of the locker room just as Mr. Williams appeared in the doorway. Oh my God, the older man gasped, rushing to where I lay, bleeding on the floor. What happened? Who did this to you? I couldn't answer, consciousness fading as he pulled out his phone to call an ambulance. The last thing I remember before passing out was the taste of blood and the sound of distant sirens. I woke up in the hospital to the beeping of monitors and the devastated faces of my parents. The damage was extensive: fractured cheekbone, orbital blowout fracture, broken nose, severe facial lacerations, concussion, and 2 cracked ribs. You will need surgery, the emergency doctor explained gently. The orbital fracture is serious and requires immediate attention to prevent permanent damage to your eye. My mother sobbed quietly as the doctor outlined the procedures and recovery process. My father, usually so composed, looked shell-shocked, his face ashen, as he stared at my battered face. Who did this to you, Samantha? He asked, his voice breaking. The police need a statement. Through my swollen lips, I managed to say one name: Brandon Lewis. What I didn't say then, what I couldn't bring myself to reveal through the haze of pain and medication, was Amber's role in the attack. But I didn't need to tell them. The truth emerged the next day, when the police checked my phone and found text messages from Amber to Brandon, sent earlier that day. Sam will be in the art room until late tonight. No one else will be there. Perfect time to make sure she understands her place once and for all. And his response, don't worry. After tonight she will not be winning any beauty contests or scholarships. The physical pain of recovery was excruciating. I underwent 7 hours of surgery to repair my shattered facial bones. The doctors inserted titanium plates to reconstruct my cheekbone and eye socket. Dozens of stitches closed the lacerations that would eventually form the scars I still carry. But the emotional trauma cut deeper than any scalpel. My own sister had orchestrated a brutal attack against me. She had used her boyfriend as a weapon, knowing he was capable of such violence. The betrayal was absolute and incomprehensible. When the police questioned Amber, she initially feigned shock and horror. "I had no idea Brandon would do something like that," she insisted. "We were just talking about how annoying Samantha can be sometimes. I never told him to hurt her." But the text messages told a different story, one of premeditation and intent. Still, without Brandon explicitly stating in writing that he planned to physically assault me, the evidence remained circumstantial. When Brandon was brought in for questioning, he claimed that he had run into me by chance. According to his version, I had become hysterical when he mentioned my presentation fiasco, attacking him, and then accidentally injuring myself when I slipped and fell against the lockers. "I tried to help her," he lied smoothly, "but she was out of control. I left to find help when she wouldn't calm down." Despite Mr. Williams' testimony that he had seen a male figure fleeing the scene, and despite the severity of my injuries being inconsistent with an accidental fall, Brandon's parents hired an expensive lawyer who emphasized his clean record and bright future. Amber provided further cover, swearing that while she had texted Brandon about my location, she had only wanted him to talk to me to help me see reason about my obsessive competitiveness. My parents, who had been blind to the depth of Amber's resentment for so long, finally saw the truth. But even they were torn, caught between their protective instinct for me and their inability to fully accept that their younger daughter could be complicit in such violence. "We need to handle this as a family," my mother said tearfully one evening at the hospital. "Pressing charges against Brandon is one thing, but involving Amber legally would tear us apart forever." I lay in my hospital bed, half my face reconstructed with metal, unable to speak clearly through the pain and swelling, and realized that even now, they were seeking the path of least resistance. The one that would cause the least disruption to our family image. The one that would not force them to confront their own role in enabling Amber's behavior for years. As I drifted in and out of consciousness that night, I made a decision. This would not end with me as a silent victim accepting whatever crumbs of justice the system might offer. Somehow, I would find a way to reclaim my voice and my power, no matter how long it took. The weeks following the attack blurred together in a haze of pain medication, follow-up appointments, and sleepless nights. I was allowed to complete the semester remotely, teachers sending assignments via email that I worked on between surgeries and recovery periods. The school administration's response to the incident was disappointingly predictable. While Brandon was suspended for 2 weeks pending investigation, he faced no permanent consequences. The official statement cited insufficient evidence to determine culpability in what may have been an unfortunate accident. His basketball coach vouched for his character, teammates provided alibis for his intentions, and his family's connections with school board members ensured the matter was handled with minimal disruption to his academic and athletic future. Amber received even less scrutiny. A single counseling session was deemed sufficient intervention for her inappropriate text messages. At home, she maintained a performance of shocked innocence around our parents while shooting me triumphant glances when they weren't looking. "I never thought he would hurt you like that," she would say, her voice dripping with false concern whenever our parents were within earshot. "I feel so terrible about what happened." My parents tried to navigate the impossible situation they found themselves in, torn between their children in ways they had never anticipated. My mother spent hours at my bedside helping change bandages and administer medication, her face lined with guilt and regret. "We should have seen this coming," she admitted one afternoon, as she helped me sip water through a straw, my jaw still wired shut from the fracture repairs. "All those incidents you tried to tell us about. We thought it was normal sister stuff." My father retreated into work, uncomfortable with the emotional complexity of the situation. When he was home, he attempted awkward gestures of support, bringing me books or new pillows to make me more comfortable, but avoiding any substantive conversation about what had happened or what should happen next. 3 weeks after the attack, my mother finally confronted Amber directly during dinner. I was still taking most of my meals in my room, unable to chew solid food, but I heard their voices rise from the dining room below. "Those text messages make it very clear you knew what Brandon planned to do," my mother said, her voice tighter than I had ever heard it. "Your sister could have been killed, Amber. Do you understand that? The doctors said if that fracture had been a centimeter higher, she might have lost her eye or suffered brain damage." "I told you, I didn't know he would hurt her," Amber insisted. "I just wanted him to scare her a little to make her back off about that stupid scholarship." Scare her? By cornering her alone in an empty school. What did you think would happen? There was a long pause before Amber responded, her voice cold and unfamiliar. "Maybe she needed to learn that she is not as special as everyone makes her out to be. Maybe you and Dad created this problem by always praising her for every little thing while nothing I do is ever good enough." The conversation devolved from there, ending with Amber storming out of the house and not returning until well after midnight. But something had shifted. My mother had finally seen a glimpse of the darkness my sister had been nurturing, and it shook her deeply. During this period of physical recovery, I sank into a depression that felt bottomless. The pain was constant, but worse was the sense of violation and betrayal. I avoided mirrors, unable to face the swollen, discolored stranger who had replaced my reflection. I flinched at sudden movements and sounds. I had nightmares where Brandon's face loomed over me again and again as lockers transformed into iron jaws closing around my head. Art, which had always been my refuge, became my therapy. Unable to use the darkroom equipment, I turned to digital photography, taking self-portraits that documented my healing process in unflinching detail. The first images were difficult to capture and even harder to look at, but there was power in controlling the narrative of my own recovery, in owning the visual story of what had been done to me. Miss Roberts visited me at home regularly, bringing art supplies and scholarship information. "The committee has extended the deadline for you," she told me during one visit. "They were horrified by what happened and want to ensure you have a fair opportunity to submit." Her unwavering support gave me something to focus on beyond my pain and fear. Gradually, I began assembling a new portfolio, one that incorporated elements of my original Invisible Boundaries concept, but now included the documentation of my recovery. The work was raw, confrontational, and deeply personal, in ways my previous photography had never been. About a month after the attack, a family friend visited our home. Andrea Turner was a lawyer specializing in victim advocacy, and though my parents had invited her ostensibly to discuss Brandon's case, I suspected my mother had ulterior motives. Andrea spoke with me privately in my room, her kind eyes taking in my still healing face without pity or revulsion. "The criminal case against Brandon is problematic," she admitted frankly. "His lawyer is building a defense around your supposed history of emotional instability, an obsession with him, claiming you attacked him first." "That is completely false," I said, anger cutting through my usual fog of pain and medication. "I know," she assured me. "But cases like this often become he said, she said situations, especially when the perpetrator has a clean record and community support. The text messages help, but his lawyer will argue they only prove Amber wanted him to talk to you, not assault you." "So he gets away with it," I said flatly. "And Amber too." Andrea leaned forward. "Not necessarily. There are other approaches we could consider." Over the next hour, she outlined several options, including civil litigation, restraining orders, and pressing for a more thorough school investigation. But what caught my attention was a seemingly casual comment she made while reviewing the police report. Brandon's coach was very quick to defend him, she noted, almost as if he had practiced doing so. This observation led to my first concrete action in reclaiming control. With Andrea's guidance and Jessica's help, we began researching Brandon's history more thoroughly. What we discovered was illuminating. 2 female students had transferred out of our school the previous year after briefly dating Brandon. Several others had abruptly quit clubs or activities where he was present. Lauren, who had connections through her older brother, brought the most valuable information. Brandon had an incident at basketball camp last summer, she told me during a visit. A kid from another school ended up with a broken arm after supposedly falling downstairs. My brother says everyone knew Brandon pushed him after an argument, but the coach covered it up to protect the team's star player. Andrea helped me document these patterns, building a file that painted a very different picture of Brandon than the clean-cut athlete the school administration was so eager to protect. We also gathered statements from friends who had witnessed Amber's escalating behavior toward me, including the presentation, sabotage, and cafeteria incident. Simultaneously, I began working with Dr. Judith Anderson, a trauma therapist recommended by my surgical team. Our sessions focused on processing not just the physical attack, but the years of subtle undermining and psychological warfare that had preceded it. "What your sister did represents a profound betrayal," Dr. Anderson explained during one session. "The family is supposed to be our safe haven where we are protected and accepted unconditionally. When that fundamental trust is broken, it affects our ability to feel secure in all relationships." Through therapy, I began to understand that my recovery would need to be both physical and psychological. I would need to rebuild not just my shattered facial bones, but my sense of safety and trust. As my physical strength gradually returned, so did my determination. The initial shock and despair gave way to a focused resolve. I began documenting everything methodically: my medical procedures, the school's inadequate response, the police investigation's shortcomings, and most importantly, the truth of what had happened and why. I converted a corner of my bedroom into a planning station with a bulletin board where I organized information and tracked progress. My parents eyed it with a mixture of concern and relief, perhaps recognizing that my methodical approach was helping me regain a sense of agency. 2 months after the attack, as summer began, I made a decision that surprised even me. I would return to school for senior year, rather than pursuing the online options my parents had suggested. I would complete my scholarship portfolio with my new transformed work. And I would ensure that both Brandon and Amber faced appropriate consequences for what they had done, not through revenge but through truth and accountability. "Are you sure?" my father asked when I announced my plan at dinner. "No one would blame you for wanting to finish school from home after what happened?" "I am sure," I replied, meeting his gaze steadily. Hiding would mean they win. I refused to give them that satisfaction. For the first time since the attack, I saw genuine pride in my father's eyes. My mother reached across the table to squeeze my hand, her own eyes bright with tears. Amber, who had grown increasingly withdrawn and defensive as my recovery progressed, merely pushed food around her plate silently. Little did she know that I was not returning simply to make a statement of resilience. I was returning with a carefully constructed plan to ensure that the truth would finally be impossible to ignore. Senior year began on a sweltering September morning. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, studying the face that would now forever be marked by what had happened. The surgeons had done remarkable work, but there was no erasing the evidence completely. A thin, jagged scar ran from my right temple to the middle of my cheek. My cheekbone had a slightly flattened appearance on that side, and my right eye sat marginally lower than my left. But rather than trying to hide these changes with makeup, I had decided to wear them openly. They were part of my story now, badges of survival rather than marks of victimhood. I dressed carefully in clothes that made me feel strong: dark jeans, boots with a solid heel that added to my height, and a deep blue blouse that brought out the color in my eyes. Around my neck, I wore a small silver camera pendant that Jessica had given me during my recovery. "Ready?" my mother asked from the doorway, car keys in hand. She had insisted on driving me for the first day, though I had regained my license the week before. "Ready," I confirmed, shouldering my bag and the portfolio case containing my scholarship submission, which I would be dropping off with Miss Roberts. The drive to school was quiet, tension building as we approached the building where everything had changed. As my mother pulled up to the drop-off area, she turned to me impulsively. "Samantha, you don't have to do this today. We could take another week, ease into it with partial days." I shook my head. "No more delays. I need to do this on my terms." She nodded, understanding. "I am proud of you. Whatever happens today, remember that." Walking through those front doors was one of the hardest things I had ever done. I felt every eye turn in my direction, heard the sudden hush of conversations as students recognized me. 3 months had passed since the attack, but high school memories are long, and my altered appearance made the gossip fresh again. I kept my gaze forward, shoulders back, moving with a confidence I had rehearsed in therapy but didn't entirely feel. Jessica, Lauren, and Emma were waiting for me at my locker, forming a protective circle as we navigated to first period. "People are staring," Emma whispered as we walked. "Let them," I replied loud enough for nearby students to hear. "I have nothing to hide." The morning passed in a blur of welcome-back conversations with teachers' curriculum overviews and the usual first-day administrative tasks. I noticed Amber only once across the cafeteria at lunch, her face paling when our eyes briefly met. She quickly looked away, huddling closer to her friends. Brandon was more difficult to avoid. Though the school had adjusted our schedules to minimize contact, we inevitably crossed paths between third and fourth periods. He was surrounded by basketball teammates laughing about something until he spotted me in the hallway. His laughter died, replaced by an expression I couldn't quite read, somewhere between defiance and unease. I didn't look away. I held his gaze steadily until he was the one to break contact, muttering something to his friends as they moved past me. Only when they were gone did I release the breath I had been holding, my hands trembling slightly as I continued to my next class. By the end of that first day, the initial shock of my return had evolved into a different kind of attention. Students who had previously ignored me approached with awkward sympathy. Teachers made pointed efforts to engage me in class discussions. The guidance counselor stopped me in the hallway to remind me that her door was always open. This was only phase 1 of my return. Phase 2 began the following week when Miss Roberts announced the student art exhibition that would feature work from scholarship applicants. "The exhibition will be open to students, faculty, and parents," she explained, handing out promotional flyers. "It is an opportunity to showcase your talent and receive feedback before final portfolio submissions." My contribution would include selected photographs from my original Invisible Boundaries series, alongside new pieces documenting my recovery titled "After the Breaking." The contrast between the two bodies of work was stark and deliberate, forcing viewers to confront the reality of what had occurred between their creation. As the exhibition date approached, I worked with Andrea to implement the next stage of our plan. We had compiled a comprehensive dossier on Brandon's history of violence and intimidation, including statements from 6 former victims who had agreed to come forward if they could do so anonymously at first. Similarly, we had documented Amber's escalating pattern of sabotage and harassment, culminating in the text messages that preceded the attack. This information was submitted to the school board, the district superintendent, and the police department simultaneously, with copies sent to 2 local journalists who had expressed interest in the story. The timing was calculated to coincide with the art exhibition, where my work would provide a visual counterpart to the documented evidence. It was not about revenge, but about truth, a truth that had been systematically minimized and dismissed. The exhibition opened on a Thursday evening in October. The art department had transformed the school gallery space, with each student's work displayed in dedicated sections. Mine was positioned centrally, impossible to ignore or bypass. The earliest arrivals were supportive faculty and friends, moving through the space with appropriate appreciation for each student's contribution. Miss Roberts stood nearby as I explained my concept to visitors, her presence a steady reassurance. Halfway through the evening, I noticed a stir near the entrance. Brandon had arrived with several teammates, their typical bravado subdued in the gallery setting. Minutes later, Amber entered with her friends, carefully positioning herself on the opposite side of the room from me. They had come as I had anticipated. They would, drawn by curiosity and perhaps a desire to demonstrate their supposed innocence by behaving normally at a school function. What they didn't know was that their presence completed the tableau I had orchestrated. At 8 o'clock, exactly as planned, Miss Roberts called for everyone's attention. "Before we continue enjoying the remarkable work on display, one of our artists has requested an opportunity to speak about her creative process." She gestured to me, and I moved to the small podium set up near the gallery entrance. The room quieted as I surveyed the faces before me, from supportive friends to curious onlookers to the 2 people who had tried to destroy me. "My name is Samantha Wilson," I began, my voice steady. And the work I am presenting tonight exists in two parts, divided by an event that transformed not just my art, but my understanding of violence, silence, and accountability. I gestured to the first section of my display, the original boundary photographs. These images explore the visible and invisible barriers between people, how we separate ourselves from each other, and the consequences of those divisions. Then I turned to the second section, the stark black and white self-portraits documenting my injuries and recovery. These images document the consequences of a different kind of barrier, the one created when violence is used to silence, when power is abused to maintain control, and when institutions fail to protect those they are responsible for. A hushed tension had fallen over the gallery. From the corner of my eye, I could see Brandon shifting uncomfortably while Amber had gone completely still. 3 months ago, I was attacked in the school locker room, my face shattered against metal lockers in an assault that required 7 hours of reconstructive surgery. This was not a random act of violence, but the culmination of a campaign of harassment and intimidation. I didn't need to name names. Everyone present knew exactly who I was talking about. For too long I remained silent about the escalating behaviors that led to that night, accepting the narrative that it was just normal sibling rivalry or teenage drama. That silence nearly cost me my life, and it certainly cost me the face I was born with. I touched my scar lightly, no longer hiding it, but acknowledging it as part of my story. My work now explores what happens after the breaking, after violence changes you permanently. But it also asks questions about responsibility, not just of those who commit violence, but of those who enable it, ignore it, or dismiss it. Brandon abruptly moved toward the exit, but found his path blocked by Mr. Williams, the janitor, who had found me that night, now standing solidly by the door with arms crossed. I continued, my voice growing stronger. As of this afternoon, the school board, district superintendent, and police department have received comprehensive documentation of the events leading to my assault, including testimony from 6 other students who experienced similar intimidation and violence, but were afraid to come forward. Murmurs rippled through the crowd as this information registered. Several faculty members exchanged alarmed glances. I am not speaking tonight to seek revenge. I am speaking to reclaim my voice and to ensure that what happened to me does not happen to anyone else. Silence protects perpetrators, not victims. Accountability is not punishment, it is justice. Amber made a desperate attempt to interrupt, stepping forward with hands outstretched. She is making this all up. She has always been jealous of me, always trying to make me look bad. Her outburst only amplified the impact of my carefully measured words. Several people stepped away from her, creating a visible circle of space that highlighted her isolation. Jessica stood up from her seat. I witnessed Amber's harassment of Samantha throughout junior year. I have provided my statement as part of the documentation. Lauren joined her. I have copies of the text messages Amber sent to Brandon the day of the attack. I am also willing to testify about what I witnessed. One by one, others stood, former victims of Brandon's intimidation, who had found courage in numbers, teachers who had observed concerning behaviors but lacked the mechanism to address them effectively, even a former basketball teammate, who had witnessed Brandon's violence at training camp. The gallery had transformed from an art exhibition to a public reckoning. Principal Edwards, who had been circulating among parents earlier, now moved quickly to the center of the room, attempting damage control. This is neither the time nor place for these accusations, he began, but was interrupted by my father, who had entered silently during my speech. With respect, Mr. Edwards, your school has failed to provide any appropriate time or place for these truths to be heard, he said firmly. My daughter nearly died on your campus. If this is uncomfortable for you, imagine how she felt waking up in a hospital with her face reconstructed with titanium plates. My mother stood beside him, her hand gripping his arm tightly, but her gaze unflinching as she surveyed the room, eventually settling on Amber, who had shrunk back against the wall. The confrontation continued for nearly an hour, as more voices joined the conversation, some defensive, others supportive, but all engaged in a dialogue that had been suppressed for too long. Brandon eventually pushed past Mr. Williams and fled the building, while Amber remained frozen in place, watching as her carefully constructed social identity unraveled thread by thread. By the time the exhibition officially closed, the landscape of power in our school had shifted irrevocably. The principal announced an emergency faculty meeting for the following morning. The school board representative present promised a thorough investigation. 2 police officers had arrived quietly taking notes in the corner. As people finally began to disperse, my parents approached me, faces solemn but eyes bright, with a mixture of sorrow and pride. "I had no idea you were planning this," my mother said quietly. "You should have told us." "Would you have let me do it if I asked honestly?" She considered this, then shook her head slightly. "Probably not. We would have worried about the consequences for you." "The consequences of silence were worse," I replied simply. My father, never comfortable with emotional discussions, simply placed his hand on my shoulder and squeezed gently. It was enough. As we prepared to leave, I noticed Amber standing alone by the exit, abandoned by her friends, looking smaller and younger than I had seen her in years. "What happens now?" she asked as I approached, her voice barely audible. I studied her for a moment, this sister who had become a stranger. Now the truth exists in the open, where it can no longer be denied or minimized. What happens next depends partly on you and whether you are finally ready to take responsibility for your actions. I didn't wait for her response, walking past her into the cool October night, where stars punctuated the darkness with points of clarity and light. The weeks following the art exhibition unfolded with a momentum that surprised even me. The documentation Andrea and I had compiled proved impossible to dismiss, especially when combined with the public nature of my confrontation and the additional witnesses who had come forward. Brandon faced a disciplinary hearing that resulted in his expulsion from school. More significantly, the county prosecutor reopened the criminal investigation, this time with multiple victim statements and a clearer timeline of events. He eventually accepted a plea deal that included juvenile detention, mandatory counseling, and community service. His athletic scholarship offers evaporated overnight. The consequences for Amber were more complex. While she avoided legal charges due to the indirect nature of her involvement, she faced severe social repercussions. Friends who had stood by her throughout junior year now kept their distance, unwilling to be associated with someone who would orchestrate violence against her own sister. Our parents, finally forced to confront the severity of the situation, made the difficult decision to send Amber to live with our aunt in Colorado for the remainder of the school year. "She needs a fresh environment," my mother explained, "and professional help that we cannot provide, while also supporting your recovery." I neither celebrated nor protested this decision. The sister I had grown up with, the one I had shared secrets and dreams with as a child, seemed to have disappeared long before the physical separation. What remained was a relationship fractured beyond simple repair, requiring a complete reimagining of what family meant. My own journey continued on multiple fronts. Physically, I underwent 2 more minor surgeries to refine the reconstruction of my cheekbone. The scarring gradually faded from angry red to silvery white, becoming less prominent but still clearly visible, a permanent reminder etched into my skin. My art portfolio, including the powerful before and after collections displayed at the exhibition, earned me the Marion Foster Scholarship, covering half my tuition to the Rhode Island School of Design. Local media coverage of my story and work led to an invitation to display selected pieces at a downtown gallery, where they were viewed by hundreds of people over a 2-week run. This unexpected platform created opportunities to speak about issues that had become deeply important to me: the culture of silence around violence in schools, the dismissal of girl drama as harmless, and the responsibility of institutions to protect vulnerable students. I began receiving invitations to speak at other schools in the district, sharing my experience in hopes of preventing similar situations. Parents approached me after these talks, sometimes with tears in their eyes, to share concerns about their own children's experiences with bullying or intimidation. Students slipped me notes describing situations they had been afraid to report. Each conversation reinforced my conviction that breaking the silence had been the right choice, regardless of the personal cost. My senior year progressed with a new normal establishing itself around me. Jessica, Lauren, and Emma remained steadfast friends, joined now by others who had witnessed my stand at the exhibition and found courage in it. Teachers who had previously seen only my academic performance now engaged with me as a whole person, someone who had faced extraordinary challenges with resilience. At home, my parents worked to rebuild trust in their own way. My father, always more comfortable with practical matters than emotional ones, installed new security features throughout the house and drove me to therapy appointments without complaint. My mother joined a support group for parents of trauma survivors, gradually learning to acknowledge her own role in enabling the dynamics that had led to the attack. Through it all, I continued sessions with Dr. Anderson, processing not just the physical assault but the years of subtle undermining that had preceded it. Family trauma is particularly complex, she explained during one session, because it contradicts our fundamental expectation of safety within our closest relationships. Will I ever be able to trust Amber again? I asked the question that had been circling in my mind for months. That depends on many factors, she replied thoughtfully. Her willingness to take genuine responsibility, your capacity for establishing new boundaries, both of your commitment to the difficult work of rebuilding. But remember, trust and forgiveness are separate processes. You can create a life of meaning and connection, regardless of how that particular relationship evolves. This perspective helped me focus on my own healing rather than fixating on Amber's journey or lack thereof. I poured myself into photography, developing a distinctive style that incorporated elements of portraiture and documentary, often exploring themes of resilience and transformation. Graduation arrived in a blur of ceremonies and celebrations. Standing on the stage to receive my diploma, I was acutely aware of how close I had come to missing this milestone entirely. The scars on my face caught the light, as I turned to acknowledge the applause, no longer something I tried to hide, but simply another aspect of who I had become. Amber returned briefly for the ceremony, staying with our parents, while I spent most of that week with Jessica's family. We encountered each other only in carefully managed settings, our conversations stilted and superficial. The chasm between us remained vast, but the active hostility had subsided into something more like wary distance. Summer brought preparations for college and my move to Rhode Island. I spent those months building a foundation for my future visiting campus, connecting with roommates, finalizing financial aid, and creating a support network that would help me transition to this new chapter. I also began volunteer work with a local organization that supported survivors of violence primarily through art therapy and peer mentoring. Working with younger survivors helped contextualize my own experience, placing it within a larger pattern of how trauma ripples through lives and communities. 3 years passed before Amber and I had our first real conversation about what had happened. She had completed high school in Colorado, then enrolled in a community college there studying early childhood education. According to our parents, she had been in consistent therapy throughout that time, working through her own issues of jealousy, insecurity, and displaced anger. She contacted me during my junior year of college, asking if we could meet when I came home for winter break. Against the advice of several friends, I agreed, suggesting a neutral location, a coffee shop downtown where we had never been together. She arrived before me, already seated at a corner table with 2 steaming mugs. The years had changed her as well. Her once perfectly styled hair now cut in a practical bob, her designer clothes replaced by simple jeans and a sweater. The confident, sometimes cruel set of her mouth had softened into something more thoughtful. "Thank you for coming," she said as I took the seat across from her. "I wasn't sure you would." "I nearly didn't," I admitted, wrapping my hands around the warm mug. "What did you want to talk about?" She took a deep breath. "I want to apologize. Really apologize, not like before when I was just saying words I thought people wanted to hear. What I did to you was unforgivable. I was consumed by jealousy and insecurity, and I took it out on the person who least deserved it." I studied her face, looking for signs of the manipulation that had once been her specialty but found only raw nervousness and what appeared to be genuine remorse. "Why?" I asked the question that had haunted me for years. "We were sisters. We shared the same home, the same parents. What made you hate me so much?" She flinched at the word hate but didn't deny it. "I never felt good enough," she said slowly. You seem to do everything right without even trying. School friends, even the way Mom and Dad looked at you with such pride. I felt invisible beside you, like I could never measure up no matter what I did. So you decided to destroy me." Her eyes filled with tears. "I never thought it would go that far. I wanted to scare you to make you feel some of the inadequacy I felt every day. But when I saw you in the hospital..." She shook her head, unable to continue for a moment. "There is no excuse. None. I have spent 3 years trying to understand why I became that person and how to ensure I never become her again." We talked for nearly 2 hours, excavating years of misunderstandings, perceived slights, and genuine hurts. The conversation was neither a miraculous reconciliation nor a final severing of ties, but something more realistic, a careful assessment of what might be possible between us moving forward. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said as we prepared to leave. "But I am trying to become someone worthy of being in your life again, even if just as a distant relative rather than a true sister." I considered this as we stood on the sidewalk outside winter sunlight, casting long shadows across the snow-covered street. "Forgiveness isn't something I can promise," I finally replied. "But I am willing to acknowledge that we are both more than the worst chapter of our story." That conversation marked the beginning of a slow, tentative rebuilding, not of the relationship we had once had or imagined, but of something new, defined by clearer boundaries and more honest communication. We would never be the close sisters of childhood dreams, but we found a way to exist in each other's lives, without reopening old wounds. As for me, the journey from victim to survivor to advocate continued to shape my path. My photography career flourished with exhibitions focusing on themes of trauma and resilience. I partnered with organizations working to prevent violence in schools and communities, using my story and art to illustrate the importance of intervention and accountability. The scars on my face faded somewhat with time and additional treatments, but never disappeared entirely. I came to see them as a map of where I had been rather than a limitation on where I could go. In interviews about my work, I sometimes reference them directly. They are part of my story, but they are not the whole story. What I learned through all of this was that healing is not a destination but a continuing process. Some days the memories feel distant and processed. Other days they resurface with unexpected sharpness. The difference is that now I have the tools and support to navigate those fluctuations without being overwhelmed by them. I also learned that silence is rarely the path to healing, either personally or collectively. By speaking the truth of what happened to me, I not only reclaimed my own narrative, but created space for others to do the same. The ripple effects of that decision continue to spread in ways I never could have anticipated. If you are watching this and recognizing patterns of escalating hostility or violence in your own life or relationships, please know that you deserve safety and support. Breaking the silence is terrifying, but living within it can be deadly. There are people who will believe you, who will stand beside you, who will help you rebuild whatever has been broken. The journey is not easy, but it is possible. I am living proof of that. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who might need to hear that they are not alone. Have you ever had to stand up to someone who hurt you? Let me know in the comments how you found the courage to break your silence. Your story matters too.